Welcome to this lecture on English grammar. The topic finite and non-finite verbs. We will explain what the finite and non-finite verbs are, how they work, how they function, how they're structured, and all these are going to be given with illustrative examples, of course. Now, in a sentence, in any given sentence, there's normally at least one verb, okay, that has both a subject and a tense. I mean, the verb has a subject and a tense. When a verb has a subject and a tense, it can be referred to as a finite verb. So now the verb which has a subject and a tense is called a finite verb. Okay? So analyzing by structure, we arrive at three main clauses by the structure of any given sentence. Now, the finite clause, which has a subject and a verb, and this verb has a tense, this is number one, whose verb element is a finite verb phrase. For example, because John is working, he couldn't come. He couldn't come. Now, because John is working, now this one is working is a verb, okay, and this verb has a tense, so this is called a finite a finite verb. Why? Because the sentence has a finite verb. Okay. Now, if we say we want to go to the school, for example, to the college, I should say, we want to go to the college. Now, we is the subject and the verb is want, and this verb, which is want, has a tense. Okay, and this tense, of course, is a present. Now, since the verb has a tense and the verb takes a subject, then the verb is a finite verb, and this is what we mean by a finite verb, a verb which has a tense and accepts or takes a subject. Now, some verbs, I mean some forms of a verb, of any given verb, are referred to as non-finite. So what is meant by non-finite verbs? The present and past participles, the present participle, which is the verb with ing, the past participle, which is the verb with ed, or sometimes with different past participle forms, okay, and the to infinitive and the to infinitive. Okay, all these three types, okay, are the most common cases of the non-finite verbs. The base form is often used in a non-finite way, of course. Every verb can be used in a clause in either a finite or non-finite way. So every verb in the English language can be used in two ways: either finite, which has a tense and subject, and non-finite, okay, which we will talk about in a minute. So a verb is finite if it is found in a clause, okay, in a combination with a subject and a tense, as we just said. Okay, it is non-finite, I mean the verb is non-finite verb, which is the constituent of the verb phrase, okay, if it is used, okay, without the verb having a tense. Sometimes, okay, sometimes the verb has no tense. So what to do? What do we call it? We call it as the non-finite verb. Non-finite, because it has no subject and it has no tense. This is the illustrative example. Leaving the room, he tripped over the mat. Okay, so leaving, the verb leave here has no tense, okay, and has no subject. So leaving here is called a non-finite verb. Okay, a non-finite verb. Now, if we take another example from the infinitive, we can say to open, okay, tear off the tap. To open, tear off the tap. Or looking around, okay, he noticed a letter on the floor. Or you can say the past participle, okay, worn out by the heat, they stopped for a drink. And so on and so forth. So many illustrative examples. Okay, this is how finite and non-finite clauses. I mean how the non-finite clause and when the non-finite clause can come. Sometimes there is no agreement, okay, between the subject, if there is one, and the verb. If there is a subject, there is no agreement between the subject and the verb. For example, that plan falling, okay, he gave up. That plan falling, he gave up. Now this falling again is a present participle. It's called, okay, the non-finite verb or verb clause, verb phrase. Good. There is a kind of sentences, okay, which has no verb, sometimes called verbless clause. Verbless clause. Now, what is verbless clause? I mean the clause which has no verb, without a verb, a clause containing no verb element. Okay, so what type of clause is it? Now, let's take this example. When ripe, fruits are delicious. When ripe, fruits are delicious. Now this one, okay, when ripe. Of course, ripe here is an adjective which is taken from the past participle. Now, when ripe, okay, should be when the fruit is ripe. When the fruit is ripe. Now here the verb, okay, the verb is here when the fruits, sorry, not fruit, when the fruits are ripe, not the fruit is ripe, the fruits are ripe. So when the fruits are ripe, they are delicious. So for certain stylistic techniques, it is used like this: when ripe, okay, fruits are delicious. So here we can say a verbless clause, although it is in fact a verb clause. Why? Because it has an implicit verb, which is are, and an implicit subject, which is fruits. Okay, however, it is written like this and we have to accept it as native speakers use. There are some notes to be taken into account. As I always told you, that the name of the clause depends principally and basically on the name of the verb it contains, because it is, the verb is the most important element in a clause. Therefore, if the verb is called finite, then the clause will be called a finite clause. And if the verb is non-finite, then the clause is going to be non-finite clause. Okay, so Keep this in mind. This is a very important note. So it depends. And now we can see how important, how significant the verb is in any given sentence. Now, the most prominent difference between the finite and non-finite clause is that the tense is clear in the non-finite clause, while it is not in the non-finite clause, as I said. Okay, when we say, for example, I am happy to meet you. Okay, here we cannot recognize the tense, okay, of the verb meet, but I can know that the tense of the verb am, which is present. So from this tense we can come to know that the tense of the non-finite verb is present. Why? Because from the tense of the main clause. However, in the finite verb, which definitely has a tense, then we can easily find out the tense. If I say I go to school every day, and this simple example. Now go is a finite verb, and how can I know the tense? The tense is clear because the tense of the verb of the sentence of the clause is a present, is a present. Okay. Now the verb here is a finite one. Okay, and since it is a finite, since it has a tense, then it is pretty clear to find out about the tense. Good. Now, finite and non-finite clauses. Okay. Now we have been talking about the finite and non-finite verbs. Keep this in mind. Okay. We have been talking in the first 6 slides on the finite and non-finite verbs. Now here we come to talk about the finite and non-finite clauses, and how can we know that this clause is finite and that clause is non-finite? How? I just told you we can find out about this through the verb, whether it is finite and or non-finite. Okay, finite verb, then the clause is finite. Non-finite verb, then the clause is non-finite. So, finite and non-finite clauses. Of course, there are 4 classes of non-finite clauses. I just mentioned the verbs in the beginning. Okay, resulting from the 4 classes of the non-finite verbs, which I just mentioned. They are infinitive with 2. Okay, infinitive with 2, present participle, past participle, and bare infinitive. Now let's start with the infinitive with 2. Number 1, which finite clause number 1. Infinitive with 2 has 2 types. Infinitive with 2 with a subject, and infinitive with 2 without a subject. These are very important. I have taken them, okay, from your book because they are so detailed in your book, and you may feel lost when dealing with the book. I know it is very detailed, so I've extracted them in order to be as clear as possible to you. So let's take them in this way. The infinitive with 2, which has 2 types, with a subject and without a subject. Now, with a subject, for example, we can say the best thing would be to tell everybody. Okay, the best thing here is the main clause, which has a verb, and the verb has a tense, and so on and so forth, which means the verb is finite. The second one, to tell everybody, and here is the issue. The non-finite verb, which is to tell, okay, everybody. To tell everybody is the non-finite clause with a subject. What is the subject? The best thing. Okay. Sometimes the finite clause is without a subject. Okay, without a subject. For example, the best thing would be for you to tell everybody. The best thing would be for you to tell everybody. Okay. Now here we can see, of course, to tell here, to tell is the to tell everybody is the finite clause. Okay, and here the verb, which is finite, the infinitive, which is finite. Now, what about the pronoun you? Okay, what about the pronoun you? Is it a subject? Is it an object? Is it a prepositional phrase? What is its function here? Okay, what is its function here? Okay, now here is the problem. Please pay very much attention to this. Now here I've just made a trick. Now here the sentence with a subject, not without a subject. The sentence with a subject, and the subject is you. Okay, while here, okay, to tell everybody has no subject. Come on guys, it has no subject. Okay, so I should say the sentence without or the clause without a subject. These are the two types. Why? Because the exemplifications are different, examples are different. Here the best thing would be here we cannot take the subject of this clause and put it as the subject to the non-finite clause. So this clause, this non-finite clause, is without a subject. There's no subject. But here, okay, here the best thing would be the same as the first one, but the difference is that for you is the subject of the infinitive non-finite clause. And the same example, we can say it is permissible to eat this meat. Okay, without a subject. To eat this meat is a non-finite clause without any subject. While it is permissible to eat, it is permissible for you to eat this meat. Okay, here is a subject. Is a subject of a non-finite clause with a subject. Good. Now, infinitive, sometimes as I said, bare infinitive, infinitive without to, which is called bare infinitive. Infinitive without to. This is type number 2. Okay, infinitive without to, and this again with a subject and without a subject. Okay, with a subject and without a subject. Okay, for example, all I did was hit him on the head. Was hit him on the head. So hit here is the non-finite verb, and all I did and hit him is the hit him on the head is the finite clause with a subject. While without a subject, rather than John do it, okay, rather than John do it, I'd prefer to give the job to Mary. I'd prefer to give the job to Mary. And here I cannot play the same the same trick with you, because it is pretty clear. There is no subject here on the object, so here is without a subject, okay, and here with the subject, because John here can be the subject. Why John here takes do, not does? Because here it is not a verb, it is a non-finite verb. It is not finite verb, it is a non-finite verb. It is not finite verb, it is non-finite verb, and non-finite verb takes no tense, okay, and this is the issue. The third type of the non-finite finite and non-finite clauses, the third type of non-finite clause is the ing participle, which is the verb plus ing, again without a subject and with a subject. Without a subject, okay, for example, leaving the room, he tripped over the mat. So we're after this one. We're not after the second one, because the second one is the main clause, and it must have a subject and a finite verb. Okay, we are after this. Leaving the room. Leaving the room. The verb leave with ing is the present participle. Okay, and the room here it is the non-finite clause, and this is the issue of the non-finite clause, which is or which has an implicit meaning. This implicit meaning could be when he left the room. When he, this is the subject, when he left the room, he tripped over the mat. Okay, but for, as I said, for certain stylistic issues, okay, such a construction is introduced by the English native speakers, and we are just describing what they do in their language, just like other people when studying our Arabic language and describe our Arabic language, they would say this is how they use it, the native speakers. Now the second type, which is without with a subject, her aunt, this is the example, her aunt having left the room, I declare my love for Celia or Celia, okay, with her aunt having left the room. Okay, now this again, her aunt is the subject, having left the room is the non-finite clause. This clause, non-finite clause, again has its implicit meaning, which could be when her aunt have left the room, I declared my love for Cecilia, and so on and so forth. Okay, now the fourth type of the finite and non-finite clauses, the fourth type of the finite the non-finite clause is the ed participle. Okay, the clause which has the verb, the non-finite verb which has ed participle. Okay, the ed of the past participle. Now again, without a subject, we say covered with confusion. Okay, covered with confusion. I left the room. Again, this one covered. Okay, and this is the ed. When I say ed of the past participle, all the constructions, all the forms of the past participles of all different verbs. Now it doesn't mean it must be the ed. Sometimes we have the verb cut, which has no ed in the past participle. It is the same, cut. Then we can use it. Cut, for example, cut with a knife. Okay, I told the police of the wound. Okay, I told the police. So cut with the knife, and so on and so forth. For example, drove, driven. driven fast, I went to the school, to the college, and so on and so forth. So pay attention to this issue. With a subject, we left the room and went home. The job finished. Okay, the job finished. We left the room and went home. There's nothing in here. The issue is in here. This is the non-finite clause. Okay, the job finished. Here there is certain issue regarding the verb finish, whether it is finite or non-finite verb. So the clause is finite and non-finite clause. So the subject is normally introduced with the preposition with, okay, when the ing or ed non-finite is used. For example, with the tree growing or grown. With the tree growing or grown tall, we got more shade. So we often use the preposition with, okay, when we have non-finite clauses having non-finite verbs. Okay, this issue, as I just said, this issue is a problematic issue because we sorry, we can say that the job finished. The job finished is a sentence. Okay, is a sentence. Although it is a clause, and the verb is finite. Although, okay, it should be the job was finished. However, here it is considered non-finite. Why? Because there is no copular or linking verb between the subject and the complement or predicate. Now, that's all for the finite non-finite clause. Let's make a quick recap to the finite and non-finite clause. The finite non-finite verbs. The finite verbs are the verbs that take subject and tense. Whenever we have a clause with a subject and the verb with a tense, then the verb is a finite verb. Otherwise, the verb is non-finite. Otherwise, having no tense, having no subject, the verb is non-finite. Okay. Again, how to classify clauses according to finite or non-finite? It is a piece of cake to find out the division. Whenever the verb of a given clause is finite, then the clause is going to be a finite clause. Whenever the verb is non-finite in a clause, in a given clause, then the clause is going to be non-finite clause. Now, what are the non-finite clauses? There are four types. The clauses that are infinitives with two infinitive, the infinitives without two or bare infinitives sometimes. 3. The ing form. The ing form non-finite clauses. And 4. The ed past participle non-finite clauses. All these four clauses, four types of non-finite clauses, can come with two situations, two constructions. One is without a subject, having no subject, and the other is with a subject, taking a subject in one way or another, taking a subject in one way or another. That's all for the finite and non-finite verb clauses, verbs and clauses, in addition to the verbless sentences. I mean the sentences which have no verbs, although they are the verbs are implicit. In all these finite, non-finite clauses, there must be an implicit verb and subject. an implicit verb and subject, because back to my first sentence, without a verb there is no clause. Without a verb there is no clause. But the issue here is different. Why? Because the verb is implicit. Okay, the verb is implicit, which is mustatir, we can say in Arabic, mustatir. That's all for me. Thank you very much. Again, if you have any question, any query, you can contact me online. Thank you.